We'll let everybody join and then we'll get started in just a moment. Welcome those who are joining us already. We're just going to give everybody a minute to connect and then we'll get cracking with today's Q&A. And whilst we get moving, why not just drop into the chat where you're joining us from? We've got Alexis here from the sunny side of the US. Amanda in Bonnie, Scotland. Maybe not as sunny as...
No, it's not looking too bad out, actually.
And Isabella suffering the heat wave of the southeast of the UK, of course.
With no air conditioning.
Kind of how it is in San Francisco, too. Not used to heat waves.
Brilliant. We'll just give everybody a few more minutes to get connected and then we'll get underway in just a minute. Super. Okay, well, let's get underway. We've got only a short amount of time and lots and lots and lots to talk about in this special Q&A session, redefining approaches to marketing in financial services. So this session came about through various conversations with different organizations in the financial services space, looking for advice, hints, tips on how do we get better at what we do? How do we maximize the tool set we've got? But actually in use cases that are really, really specific to my organization. There's a lot of generic content out there in the market, specifically around marketing automation and marketing operations, but how do we take that specifically into the financial services market? So today, hopefully, we're going to cover some of those insights and share with you from our panel of experts, who I'll introduce in just a second, some of the different use cases or examples or things that they're thinking about for the future. For those of you who don't know JTF Marketing and it's the first time you've joined one of our webinars, then welcome. We run these every 2 weeks, so they are pretty regular. They're on various topics surrounding marketing automation as well as marketing technology and strategy, so definitely worth attending some of the others. Lots of recordings on our website if you want to go and have a look and listen back to some of the previous conversations. But ultimately, we specialize in Marketo Engage and Adobe product. And really helping organizations maximize that investment. It's one of the biggest investments in the tech stack today. And so we're always looking at what are the ways in which we can use this technology, not just to do basic day-to-day marketing of getting email campaigns out the door, but how do we go beyond just that marketing cycle into the life cycle of a customer as well. And that's where we truly unlock the value of Marketo Engage. So today on the panel, I have Alexis Falco. So she's the Vice President of Marketing at PCBB, a B2B financial services company catering to the community financial institutions in the US. With 20 years experience, she's going to be answering some of the tough questions on this panel, I'm sure, but has been using Marketo over the last 8 years at the organization and runs all of the operations and logistics surrounding its use today, and is a Marketo Certified Expert. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We also have on our panel Amanda Taylor. So she heads up CRM and email marketing at the Bailey Gifford Investor Organization and has been using Marketo for about 4.5 years and is also a Marketo Certified Expert. We've got a full panel of certified experts. Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then we're honored to be joined by the product marketing manager herself, Isabella Hargreaves, who looks after the B2B portfolio at Adobe. And she's joined us to give us some insights from the Adobe side of things, which will be very exciting to hear as well. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And finally, I'll be your host today, so James Fletcher. I started JTF Marketing 9 years ago, really focused on helping organizations with Marketo and understanding how do we maximize it. So hopefully we'll get into some pretty good questions throughout the session. It will be mainly a panel discussion. If you get any questions that you want answered along the way, please use the Q&A that is found on the bar at the bottom. For those of you familiar with Zoom, and for those of you not, it's down the bar on the bottom. So you can definitely enter your questions in there or put them in the chat, wherever is most comfortable for you. We're going to cover a range of topics today, and these were topics that are kind of hot topics of the industry right now, really around customer engagement. How do we grow or influence the growth in revenue? How do we stay within the realms of compliance? Because actually compliance in a financially regulated environment can be slightly complicated, a little bit tricky to work with, and we're always trying to push the boundary in marketing and do something a little bit more creative. And sometimes we get our hands slapped, other times we get a gentle nod, a curious nod of what that might look like in the future. So we'll cover some of those topics. We'll also look at some of the common challenges faced by financial services institutions in this new way of marketing, because it's changing, right? Everything's starting to shift much more online. We're starting to see different behaviors than what we saw before the pandemic as well. It had to be mentioned, of course. And we will, of course, get on to AI. We will talk a little bit about AI and how and what we can start to use in this world, again, of this financial services regulated environment. And then we'll get into some Q&A from you guys in the audience if you have any of those questions. Before we get started, though, I'd like you to just scan this QR code or head over to slido.com and enter this lovely number. I'll give you a few seconds to go and do that. And we're going to start with a couple of questions just to get a little bit of an understanding about where you guys are today. So scan it with your mobile, head over on your web browser, and you should then get to our first question of the day, which is, do you feel your marketing efforts are up to date with the latest trends and technologies? And again, keep this specific to your financial services industry. And you've got a range of smileys here, from crying at the bottom to in love at the top. So let's see how those scores come in. Exciting to see a bit of a mix here already and different people's engagement. Got a bit of a balance out here at the moment. And if you've already voted on this question, you can jump ahead to the next one, which will slide along at the top of your screen. We'll just give everybody a chance here just to jump in. So it looks like we're predominantly sat in the middle here, sat in the fence maybe, for a lot of people saying, is it cool? Is it really happening for me? Or am I doing the day-to-day stuff? Of course, big chunk there in the second column, maybe not so excited about doing the latest trends. Brilliant. Well, we'll move on, just to keep things going. So the next question is, what's your biggest marketing automation challenge? So go ahead and throw in some answers here. This one's a bit of a word cloud, so if you do see more than one answer that you think is relevant to you, you can click on it as well, and that will add your vote to that specific word. So we get attribution, ROI, buy-in from stakeholders, engaging our workforce with the technology. I'm guessing that might be the marketing team, or maybe beyond the marketing team. Content availability, bespoke solution, generate leads, budgets. Some great topics there coming out already. ROI and attribution taking the lead, of course, here as we see them bigger on the word cloud. Understanding intent, developer knowledge, sign-off process, segmentation. Brilliant. Lots of great responses. Well, if you're still writing, keep writing. Otherwise, we will crack on into our Q&A. So let me just get rid of the screen here, and you get to see everybody's face a little bit bigger than in the corner. And so I guess with some of that context, right, if we think about some of those challenges already that you guys are sharing with us, none of them are relatively new to this space, right? When we think about the financial services market, tracking return on investment attribution's always been significantly much more complicated than any other market, especially if you think B2B software as a service. If we think about some of this lead generation piece, even the sign-off process, right? If we're thinking about compliance, we've already mentioned how they can be a challenging stakeholder to get things signed off. There's lots of different challenges that we can have a look at here. So let's start with challenges then. Let's go to you, Amanda, first. What are some of the challenges that you are facing in your financial services organization in terms of implementing, well, Marketo in your case as a Marketo user, and maybe other technologies? And how have you tried to tackle those and overcome them?
Yeah, I think one of the kind of themes that was coming out in your Slido, and one of our biggest challenges as well, is stakeholder buy-in. Especially when we were just kind of implementing Marketo. We're used to sort of just doing kind of blast campaigns, which was obviously to mass audiences for a particular audience. But what we found with Marketo is we can actually reach it out to a wider audience. But with that comes with bringing your stakeholders along the journey with you. You know, a lot of our stakeholders tend to be kind of our intermediary sales team, our institutional client contacts, and they're used to doing a lot of one-to-one communications. So when you introduce a tool like Marketo that is capable of lots of different things and comes with a lot of complexities, it's how you bring them round, and just, yeah, as I say, kind of getting that stakeholder buy-in. To overcome that, as I say, it is a big challenge, and I think time is a big factor. Initially, getting someone on board, that's a big win, and you can obviously use that as a bit of a case study to then take forward, you know, attending team meetings, explaining exactly how the system works, explaining how what the stats are behind it. So that's, yeah, a big challenge for us. And I think the other kind of main challenge for us is the kind of availability of content and tailored content as well. Sometimes we find that when we do get a stakeholder on board, they're very keen to send out emails, but if we don't have the content that's right for their audience, then there's a big challenge there. You know, we want to do more hyper personalization, which is a hot topic, and just kind of tailoring our approach. So that's a big challenge. I mean, how to overcome that? I think just sharing insights in terms of what people have been engaging with, what they're interested in from what we can see from our email engagement helps. And just challenging the way people are thinking. I think it's historically people have kind of thought about content first rather than their audience first. So yeah, it's just kind of challenging that.
Brilliant. I mean, that's really interesting insight, right? Because always getting those initial proof of concepts up and running are the toughest ones, because this is something new, it's scary. What will happen, what might happen, especially in this compliant environment, right, where we have a lot of regulations. Alexis, do you have some examples of challenges that you've seen rolling out Marketo over this period of time?
Certainly, yeah. You know, a lot of ours surrounds data, but just to kind of piggyback off of what Amanda was saying with the culture shift that has to happen within your company, there's always a historic divide between sales and marketing. And obviously the marketing team is the group that would be very passionate about marketing automation. It's just speaking our language. Sales can always be a little bit reticent. So my only recommendation on that aspect, bring them to the table. Talk about how you get to qualify leads together, how the quality of leads brought over to sales are better and greater. You're not going to get accidental competitors, if you will, sent over the table where somebody has to say, or in sales anyways, why are you sending me this? This is not what I need. And I think the other thing that might help sales get on board is to help them understand that in effect, it can shorten the buying cycle for a lead or a contact that comes over. So there's a huge benefit. And if you really need to convince them, start small, start a pilot, and then scale that. And like Amanda said, having that champion will really help. Bring a champion to the table who's not a part of your team, so they're not as biased, and let them kind of talk about all of the benefits that are around it. For us, one of the other things was around data. Data hygiene and segmenting. And I know for all of the questions that you're going to ask down the line, segmentation and personalization are going to be like number one. We're just going to keep hitting it home. But data hygiene is a huge thing. And as financial services companies, we can attest there are silos of data in our company all over the place. So one of the things that you can do first is try to figure out how to integrate all of those silos. And the benefits are multifaceted. You not only get to integrate your data and have current information across systems, but it's a way of reducing errors because of that. And as new information comes in, as new contacts are coming into your database or old ones that are maybe moved or changed their title, that information gets to be kept current. And because you're syncing those silos, it's kept current across all of the platforms. And then of course, there's data segmentation, right? So writing content, historically, as Amanda said, has been first, and then writing content for different personalities has been a secondary consideration. When you have all of that data coming into your system and you can personalize based on what you know and the behaviors, I mean, it's great. You get to have a more custom relationship and a better way to position your brand in front of people. So if you want to segment maybe based off of a CFO versus the COO, you're talking about the financial benefits of your products versus the operational efficiencies of your products. So you can send out one email, which is fantastic, and then marketing automation will slap in that different personality that you've tailored, you've tailored your content to, and then send it out for you. So it's a bit of a workhorse in that regard. And like I said, you're gonna hear me talk a lot about segmentation and personalization as we move down the line, because that's a huge benefit, and that was definitely a huge challenge for us, especially in the world of batch and blast, which is historically how we were doing it prior to Marketo.
Yeah, and I think that mindset shift in any business is a challenge, right? Working across a range of organizations, implementing marketing automation and trying to scale it. The number one challenge is, what else can I do with this technology? How else can I apply it to make life easier for the entire business, not just for marketing, right? Because the marketing part, we've had marketing automation for quite a number of years now. It's in a plateau almost of, there's only so many campaigns we can keep building. It then gets into optimization mode and simplification mode in many cases. How do we now make sure we're targeting the right people at the right time? And you already touched on this piece that's super, super critical, data. And data is a brilliant segue to take us to Isabella on the question of compliance. So compliance obviously being absolutely critical in the financial services market. How do marketing automation platforms like Marketo Engage ensure the compliance with industry regulations and still enable the likes of Alexis and Amanda and their teams in order to personalize effectively in campaigns, right? We talk about this hyper personalization as the kind of next level.
Yeah, sure. So we ensure that we are compliant with all different regulations, right? Whether it's GDPR or whether it's US state laws. That's something at Adobe that we pride ourselves on doing. Specifically with Marketo, for example, you can reduce compliance risk within the financial services industry with standard pre-approved email libraries. So you can then make sure that you have the approval before anything goes out. We look at organizations who've shared case studies with using Marketo, and it's really transformed the way that they're operating. So there's much more efficiency gains, time saved with actually doing all of the different manual workflow stuff of checking that emails are compliant or whatever. Marketo takes away an element of that kind of manual side of things. So yeah, we're making sure that companies are remaining compliant in terms of the data side of things.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think it's really important, right? When we look at, of course, Adobe's stance in the market in terms of regulation, even the hard work that's already gone into AI and how important that is in building those core frameworks that organizations can follow, I think is really impressive and really helpful, right? For especially in a financial services organization, when you need to go back and go, there's been a lot of money go behind these certifications and the security, etc. This is why we've put these in place, or this is why our tool of choice might be something like Marketo Engage. Alexis, how have you focused on that, maintaining and getting compliant when it comes to the content, right? Isabella refers to those pre-approved assets that are there that we can keep reusing and maximizing as part of our lead funnel. How have you seen it work, and what are the kind of changes that are impacting for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? So, I mean, in terms of content, we have our set of approvals just as a bank and as a financial services company. But in terms of the operating of that within Marketo in particular, Marketo has some great tools, right? As Isabella said, as well as like consent management tools, audit trails, but there's so much work that companies will have to do themselves, both in implementing compliance standards and of course, its subsequent use. I mean, one of the first things that we did, or I should say one of the major things that we did when we implemented Marketo, was we set up a subscription preference center. Preference centers are not foreign to marketing teams. They're pretty much across the board. But from a compliance standpoint, it allowed us to do a couple of things. One is, of course, it allows us to have the global unsubscribe, which is a function of Marketo. It's a function of most automation platforms where it's automatically put onto your emails unless you have some form of an exception, like you deem an email as an operational one. But with the subscription preference center, the nice thing about it is you can then present options other than just a global unsubscribe. So if somebody doesn't want to receive your I mean, for us, like your international banking items versus your cash management versus your lending, you can present those as options. So you're not losing the lead altogether, and you're learning more about what their actual interests are, right? And then you can continue down the path of personalizing. So yeah, the subscription preference center was a really great piece to help us. And the other feature that we use a lot is templates. If you can do things on a global level, that will help you out so much. So you're not doing things on a manual level every time you start a new asset, every time you build an email or a landing page. As long as you're doing it from a template and a global level, that should help out vastly in terms of the amount of work you're doing. For instance, on our website, we have a privacy policy. You have to have a privacy policy. That's a part of the compliance and the regulations. You have to tell people what you're doing with their data. Easy. You have a landing page, right? That's coming out of Marketo. It's meant to mimic, ideally, well, I guess in our case, what your website looks like. Great. At the bottom of the template, put in that privacy policy link. Not only are you then adhering to the compliance standards, but then you can also maintain it going forward. So if there are changes to the link or changes to the policy, it's happening right there on a global level. So those things are huge. I would say for anybody who's considering marketing automation and you have compliance that you have to do, when you're at the point of automating, bring in your IT teams, bring them in early, bring them in often. They always have to comply, I mean, for the most part, right, with regulatory standards. So they'll know some of the pitfalls and guide you through there. And then if you're syncing with other data systems like Salesforce, for instance, bring those admins early. I have found with Marketo, right, and that's the automation platform that we use, so I can't speak for other ones, but you have the ability to turn on and off the data that you want in and out. So if there's consumer data happening for you within Salesforce, don't turn it on. Or if you don't want Marketo to override information that's sitting in your CRM, don't let it override it. So you have these abilities to kind of turn these dials right up and down and control the flow and control how information is being overridden and how it's being accessed. And those are huge wins when you have to, have compliance. So do it at a global level if you can. Bring in your IT teams and your admins at every step if you can. That's truly going to be monumentally helpful.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and I think there's, of course, an ever-evolving regulatory landscape, right? So even if we just think about data privacy, comms privacy, and you go to the other end of the scale of, okay, what is the financial services industry doing, PCI, all that kind of stuff, it gets quite complicated really quickly. And again, I think the control of what you have and what you can see is really important when it comes to automation. I know some examples specifically around data points. A lot of organizations use banding, so we don't actually bring in the actual value of, let's say, someone's investment portfolio. We bring in a banded field, which gives it a little bit more anonymous. I can't say that today. I'm going to pass on that word. And I think the other thing is then on content, in terms of approving content, of course, you've got tools like Workfront as well, right? Where you can plug those into Marketo, pump content through it, and start actually tagging it of being approved or non-approved. I love this idea, and I'm a big champion for global assets in Marketo of not rebuilding stuff. Global audience lists that are already approved, because that's kind of compliance, but it's kind of also the data manager's team, depending on whether you get a data manager. And sometimes there's an audience manager who's responsible for that. So again, depending on your organization, you might have someone that needs to approve those and own those. And again, with the granular permissions, you can control those as well, right? And on that content piece, I know there's organizations who will put compliance references in the footers as well. So when they get something signed off, they get the ID from the compliance team. They know it's had the thumbs up. They get the reference on the email. So if the email goes out the door and someone complains, they say, what's the reference? That's the one that no one got approved, or it's got no reference. Why did it go out the door? So there's lots of different ways in which we can automate some of that experience, right? And again, we can use some of the power of tokenization even in Marketo as well. But yeah, compliance is one of those topics. I think it's a whole Q&A in itself. What is the process? It differs per organization, differs per region, differs by country, right? Again, US compliance versus European compliance, completely different. And now the UK in its own little island doing whatever we're doing at the moment. Again, compliance is going to be shifting again. I think always when we look at preference centers, and you rightly mention it, Alexis, we always look at a global level, right? We're saying, okay, what's the worst case scenario across the globe? What are all the legislations that we need to abide by? And which ones are relevant to our business, right? So when you're working in a global organization, it's of course a bigger project to roll out than working in one specific region or one specific country. Again, I take always the example that I found fascinating and never knew anything about. In Australia, after 6 p.m. in an evening and at weekends, you are not allowed to send emails to anyone, even if it's B2B, which was a real surprise to me. But again, you can put all the controls in place within Marketo to control when those emails go and make sure that they go within those time constraints. Fantastic. I mean, I love the subject of compliance because I think I get a little bit techie and nerdy about how do we do it, right? Which is probably the part that I find most interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about use cases and examples of how you guys have been using Marketo. So Amanda, I don't know whether you want to share with us kind of a success case that of how brilliant marketing automation has been for your organization, and how maybe you've looked at that from an engagement perspective, or even a revenue attribution and growth perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So the couple of examples I have is utilizing kind of dynamic content within Marketo. So we kind of recently moved a lot of our clients and prospects onto a digital servicing model. So they were previously receiving their quarterly and monthly reports, very manual process, and a lot of kind of teams involved as well. But now using kind of velocity scripting within Marketo, we have campaigns set up for these clients and prospects that we're able to send out kind of tailored emails, exactly the reports that they have either signed up to receive or that our client contacts have opted them in to receive, you know, what investments that they have with us. And these emails are fully tailored, which is great. And, you know, as Alexis kind of said, they are set up for a global audience as well. And we've set them up at a global level to be able to kind of not copy and paste each month and quarter, but, you know, we can utilize the scripting that has been set up by our digital team who manage the kind of scripting of our emails, and we're able to kind of reuse that once it's set up. It is very easy to you know, make slight tweaks to. the other kind of example we have is using segmentation and with the dynamic content. So our monthly kind of update emails that we do to kind of our wider audience, we use segmentation to either display or add or remove content depending on what someone has already engaged with. So what we found there is obviously that increases engagement. You know, if someone has already engaged with something, why show them it again? Let's utilize the space within the email to show them different pieces of content. And so we found that using segmentation and dynamic content has proved really beneficial for us.
Fantastic. So you're really focusing in on that. How do I keep the relevance of that content, that report, right? That summary. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with velocity scripting, it's a JavaScript language which allows you to pull multiple pieces of data together and personalize based on multiple characteristics. So dynamic content, we can set up certain conditions, but we can only use one level of complexity, to say in the simplest terms, right? Whereas a velocity script, we could say, if let's take an investor, right? If the investor is pre-retirement, living in the southeast of the UK with a portfolio of £1 million, then show them a certain piece of content versus someone who is already retired, £500,000 in the retirement fund and living in the northeast. So again, you can really get into some granular personalization. The complexity of building up that personalization also is really impressive. So I think, Amanda, for you and your team, that was a great achievement to get into that detail and think, how do we map this out even? And how do we build a structure which then we can have the content to support, right? Back to our earlier comment, we've got the data, we've got the segmentation, we've got that kind of matrix of what do we need content for. Now, where's the gaps? And I think, again, you used a great example of show or hide content dependent on that individual, whether they've engaged already or not, which is, again, an advanced engagement tactic, right, within even Marketo Engage. Alexis, turning to you then for some use cases or examples, how can Marketo be effectively leveraged in the financial services? I've just got Alexa kicking off in the background here.
It's a common tale with my name.
That was a surprise.
It happens all of the time to me. Well, I mean, I don't say my name, but it happens all the time to everybody.
Yeah. So apologies for that. So how can we effectively use Marketo in the financial services space for lead generation, nurturing, that conversion process of how do we get leads through the funnel, right? Is there anything that you guys have done that would kind of build into those areas?
I mean, when you're talking about marketing automation and when you're talking about Marketo, you kind of just hit all three nails on the head, right? Like every single one of those things influences the other. And there are, I mean, I don't want to say a million, I don't know how many there are, but Marketo is a robust tool and it lets you do all those things. You know, in terms of like lead generation, when you're able to do automated campaigns and you're able to use dynamic content and even progressive profiling, for instance, that's an area that we use on forms, right? So when you have dialed in control on your landing pages and you can put on automated forms, you can do a couple of things. One is that you can build on the information that you're learning about people without inundating them with 20 fields every time, right? You're going to have repeat visitors. They're going to fill in the form and they don't want to keep doing it. And there is that expectation of, hey, company, you know me, I'm your customer, I've been here. So you don't want to keep asking them the same questions. In order to do that effectively and elegantly, you build on it using progressive profiling. I think the other thing that adds value, especially with the forms, is the ability to suppress, right? So if you have a competitor who's coming in, and I alluded early about, you know, sending leads off that aren't competitors, right? Because you've made that accord with sales in your culture. But yeah, you can suppress. So you can suppress people from going off to sales. You can ensure the information is intact as you're doing it, and that is quality lead. So those are really great things for lead generation. In terms of nurturing, obviously one of the big functions that we use is nurture programs. So somebody comes in off of a form, they've downloaded a brochure, and one of the first places that we push them into is a nurture program. And it's brilliant. It allows you to do a steady flow of information to a contact over time. And ideally, you're meeting them at where they're at, right? Wherever they are along the sales cycle that you may have predetermined, or maybe you're still figuring it out. But it's a really nice aspect where you get to drop that in. It takes some upfront work because you need to identify what it is you want to say to this person and build in your segmentation and your dynamic content to speak to the different types of people that you might be nurturing, but it gives you a chance to build that relationship and put your brand nicely in front of people until they're ready to maybe make a purchasing decision. And at that point, right, here we go, we're off to conversions. So it all kind of leads into itself. You've heard me tell the story. So with lead conversion, one of the big features that we use is sales alerts. So when somebody is ready, because we've nurtured them, or maybe they've hit that that bingo call to action of requested a demo or downloaded a brochure, or they said contact us, we ship them off to sales immediately. And in a sales alert, especially if you're integrated with different CRMs, you can bundle in information. So we might put in some account information about that person, or just ancillary details, maybe a couple of things that they've done on the site. It's endless, the information that you could probably put in there. But it is a time savings for the salesperson who receives that information, because they're not forced to dial into another system and look it up. They at least get a little piece of the pie to understand, like, is this somebody I need to call right now or maybe in a day, right? But it's timely follow-up is what you allow for. There's also lead scoring, which is a feature, right? So when people are engaging with your content or on your website, and the velocity, I hate to use that word because you just use it for something different, but the velocity that they're doing it, like how often are they coming to the site? Are they coming 5 times in a day or 5 times in 6 months? I mean, it's a difference. And so you're able to kind of learn about their behavior that way, and then send that person over to the salesperson that would handle that relationship, and talk to them. So it's, it's all the features kind of blend into one another very nicely. And there's a ton of stuff. I would say that I don't want to say that it's overwhelming, the amount of stuff that's in Marketo. I do know, and James can attest, when it came to nurture programs, there's other concepts involved, like nested programs, stuff like that. It's hard to sometimes keep your head wrapped around the amount of knowledge. And so then you would then hire help, right? So James, we work with James and we work with JTF to help us build out more robust campaigns when maybe we don't know what we don't know, or maybe we do know what we want to do, but we haven't quite figured out how to execute it yet, because there are a lot of different ways that you can do a lot of different things in Marketo. So I would just echo that point, that if you don't know some of the stuff that I just said, or velocity scripting, I have no idea, hire help. So anyways, I digress.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that. And actually, I'm going to give us a little break from some questions for a second. So as part of this webinar, we put together a financial services hacks guide for Marketo. So different ways in which you can maximize Marketo, different challenges that you can overcome. So we'll send this in the follow-up as well, but feel free to scan the QR code here at the moment. I'll leave that on the screen whilst we take a couple more questions, because we've got just about 6 minutes left, and I think we could carry on talking for probably another 45 minutes getting into some of these areas. But I want to focus in on some of those key challenges that we saw in the beginning around results. And I think these are always really difficult, right? When we come into the financial services world, we've already talked about how complex it is getting the data in a single place. First of all, that's one of the biggest challenges. Then getting the results in a single place in order to present those back to the business and say, hey, all this hard work and investment we've put in, this is actually what we're getting back out of it. Amanda, if we can turn to you now, what kind of measurable results have you guys seen after deploying Marketo Engage? And is there any metrics that you can tie back to, hey, that was so much better than where we were before?
Yeah, I think going back to the example that I used with that move to our digital servicing model for our reporting, this is not a stat that comes out the box of Marketo, but we did look at time saved, the people involved and how long it took them to previously do the task. So it previously used to take just one of our regions, our Benelux region, 2 days to send out their quarterly reports, because as I mentioned, they were doing it on a one-to-one basis from their Outlook. I mean, on a global scale, and that's all regions that we send these out to now, it probably takes us, you know, an hour, tops like 2 hours end to end. So yeah, that's a massive, massive time saving for us. Something else we looked at in relation to that is the kind of scalability of that as well. As I say, the way that we set it up enabled us to kind of roll that out across all regions, and execute it kind of globally. The other thing that we also track within Marketo is return on investment on our kind of third-party promotions. So we use UTMs on all of our kind of links that we share with our third parties, and we're able to kind of attribute where our lead generation names are coming from, and if there is any paid activity, then calculate a return on investment. It is quite difficult to get stats from Marketo. You know, some of the kind of out-the-box programs and reports that you can get out of Marketo they do the basics of what you need. So for email sends, and when we're kind of comparing different campaigns, we do tend to look at kind of top level metrics, clicks, opens, click to open rate, and kind of use email performance and email link performance reports are probably our most commonly used. A kind of example that we did use those reports for is our we had a film series, educational film series last year, where we were able to kind of measure exactly what clicks were coming from each film, and then report that back to the business.
Nice. That's some pretty impressive improvements, right, to how you guys work as a marketing function. I'm conscious we've got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to jump to the last question, which is on AI. So AI, of course, being more and more integrated in our daily lives, and every marketing tool on the planet now has some element of AI to it. Alexis, how do you see the future shaping up with AI as part of the mix, especially in something like Marketo Engage?
Well, I know that Marketo Engage does have some kind of AI, like predictive and dynamic chat is in there. Our company doesn't use that. And I will just preface it by saying that as a financial services company, we're usually a little slower, especially as a bank, to adopt AI. It's a little scary world, but it is everywhere. I mean, you just cannot get away from AI right now. I think in one of the ways that it can shape it is what it can do with your data. Especially as FinServs, we have data sitting in different silos. So one of the ways is always to see how you can collect that data from all those different places and infer information or trends from it. And AI can certainly help in that endeavor. Of course, its security and reliability is still to be seen. So I would say tread cautiously if that's what you're going to do as a company. But yeah, I mean, overall, AI is pretty exciting what it can do, right? It can learn and interpret and then act, all in real time. So it's kind of a wonderful place to be. It's a little bit scary to some regard, but yeah, it'll be pretty exciting. We haven't rolled out, like I said, we haven't rolled anything out with Marketo Engage. It's an area that we're exploring, but the idea of having adaptive campaigns is certainly compelling, for sure.
Brilliant. And Isabella, I may just pass to you for the kind of final comment around what are Adobe doing to help organizations in the financial services space with AI?
Yeah. So of course, and as Alexis said, AI and Gen AI can be scary. Adopting it as an organization, you're trusting generative AI or AI to essentially be a brand representative, right? So whilst we're investing and building out our AI, Gen AI capabilities, we're making sure that they are enterprise ready, and that companies can trust that the tool will effectively represent their brand in a way that they would like it to be conveyed. One thing that we're introducing this year in Marketo Engage is a new generative AI email editor tool, which is really cool. It helps with that personalization aspect that Amanda was touching on before. But we're going through all the rigorous testing of the models and everything to make sure that it's really and truly enterprise ready and scalable.
Brilliant, really appreciate that. So in our last few seconds of today, I'd like just to ask each one of you for what's been the biggest takeaway from today's meeting, and what's the one thing that you would recommend to your peers in the audience, thinking about the context of what we've talked about? Maybe we'll start with you, Amanda. Straight on the spot.
Yeah, I think something we've not actually spoken about, but something that I would recommend is to test. So there's obviously out-the-box functionality within Marketo to test things, especially if you are starting to do dynamic content, personalization, you know, test what works with your audience. So yeah, that would be my kind of key recommendation.
Brilliant. Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of build on that, you know, start small and then scale, right? Test, try to define clear objectives really is what it would be for me, some clear measurable goals. I think it'll help with the automation journey as you're mapping it out, and then also identify like what's the return on all of that work that you've just done.
Brilliant. I really, really appreciate the three of you joining us on our panel today, and thank you all for attending. The recording will go out after this. The Hacks Guide will come out to you as well. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully on our next webinar focused on financial services as well. Thank you very much, Alexis, Amanda, Isabel.
Thank you.
Thanks.